An innovative new composting program gets results, requiring a screen in every window in rental housing units, and ongoing efforts to address a staffing shortfall at the 911 center. This is Council Rewind, and I'm Dustin Weiss. When you take out your trash, typically about 20% of what's in that bag is food waste, organic stuff that would break down into soil and nutrients under the right circumstances. That means that about 20% of what the city is paying to send to the dump could be handled instead through composting. In order to explore the potential for cost savings and provide options for eco-conscious Milwaukeeans, the city is piloting a curbside compost pickup program. And on November 30th, the Public Works Committee received its first update.
And the contract was awarded to a small local company in Milwaukee called Compost Crusader. They haul organics. We're their first residential customer account. They haul for various businesses, restaurants mostly. And the materials delivered to a commercial composting site down south of the city in Caledonia called Blue Ribbon Organics.
That what looks like a sphinx is pretty tall.
Yeah, that's some finished compost after being screened. So we went out. The first photo is in the background is some material that had been brought in prior to it being processed. So what they'll do is incorporate the food waste with the yard waste. They shred it all and then create these large windrows where the decomposition is occurring, and they turn them every so often. And then that photo on the right is really the finished product that they screened out, and they're ready to sell to a variety of, whether it's in bulk to landscape and other companies, or they're also getting into the bagging of product for retail as well.
Thank you.
This program is completely optional for people to participate in the pilot zone that was devised from the authoring resolution. And again, it provides the third cart. It's every other week collection in the winter. And from April through November, it's weekly collection to really maximize that yard waste capture and potential, which is where we think a lot of the actual demand for it is having a curbside service on yard waste. Materials accepted in the program, there's a view of the education piece that was created by Annalise for our program participants, and basically, covers beyond yard waste the different categories of food waste that are included and those that are not.
So this is a look at the pilot zone. There is a northern and a southern area that we've focused on. The western boundary is I-43, I-94, and the northern zone includes areas and neighborhoods surrounding the east side and River West, and includes Alderman Kovac's area, District, Alderwoman Coggs, and Alderman Bauman's. The southern zone is Bayview and surrounding neighborhoods, and that includes areas of Alderman Zielinski's district, Alderman Witkowski's district, and Alderman Perez's district. We did focus recruitment for the program in the pilot zone, and we used a multi-prong approach to recruit individuals. During the recruitment phase, all publicity materials directed residents to the website where they filled out an interest form. As of the 20th, we had 659 individuals complete that interest form. From there, we verified that they were in the correct zone, correct housing type, those types of things, and then sent an authorization form for the resident to complete to secure their spot in the program, as well as authorize payment. We've had 490 participants complete that authorization form.
Mr. Chair, out of how many potential participants?
So there were 28 100,000 eligible households.
So what we're trying to learn from it, there's a variety of information that we're gathering and looking at to help in our evaluation for future programs and services that the city may offer or be involved in. We're looking at the demand for service, how much are residents looking for this type of service that some other communities offer. And part of that, we'll be looking at where it's offered in this pilot. Well, what subscription rate are we seeing? And then of those who've subscribed, how many are actively participating? What's the set-out rate of their carts? We'll be gauging customer satisfaction through surveys. We'll also be looking at just the program operations, how to build this program in Milwaukee.
When residents got their cart, there was a starter kit included, which had things like a kitchen caddy, sample bags, coupons, things to that nature. The cart is a 65-gallon cart, and so it's about 2/3 of the size of the cart that you have garbage and recycling in, so a little smaller.
And it's that color, too.
Yes, it's a completely solid brown body and lid with organics only imprinted on the top.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Alderman Bowl, please.
Boy, you have to have a big family to come close to filling that sucker, and you're doing this every week in the summer months, the warm weather months?
Yes, and we had a lot of discussion about the proper container size, and what we ended up, because if you're targeting food waste, then communities that have a yard waste program and then they add a food waste separate, like on the side, you really are only looking at 20 gallons. Communities that have yard waste in a cart and they're adding food waste, they've got, for yard waste, they typically have 95-gallon carts. And so then you add the food waste into that program. We don't have the yard waste collection service or the food, so we're looking at what's the right one to kind of start from scratch on this.
Now, this is otherwise of similar quality to what would be our recycling and garbage bins, probably more a recycling bin. Is that accurate here?
As far as the cart, and it's built by the same company. Besides the size, it's essentially same specifications.
So individuals, when they are dumping or putting in food scrap waste, are they asked to use and place that in a bio bag, or are you finding anyone just kind of throwing apple cores and banana peels straight into the bin?
Sure. Our message and expectation is that the yard waste, go ahead, put it in loose. But when it comes to the food waste out of the kitchen, use a biodegradable bag, which can either be the paper bags or the compostable plastic ones, of which they receive at a starter kit and a coupon for additional ones.
Having the city be vigilant on that is going to be important, particularly if you get into neighborhoods where there are rodents or rats, because from time to time we see that a lot of complaints that squirrels and or other rodents eat their way through garbage carts or eat a hole there. Obviously, when they smell food scraps, that's going to be something that will draw them there, and otherwise you're going to have more of a mess potentially than you have of potential benefit that you're drawing.
Yeah, agreed. And that's why, some communities say, oh, just food waste, just kind of layer it between the yard waste and so on. And because of those concerns, we felt it was appropriate to require bagging.
Okay. Very good, thank you.
Great, thank you.
So to date, we have 490 total subscribers, and the average set-out rate for those first 2 weeks of service was 87%, which we were very happy to see. The total weight collected was 7,820 pounds, and average per pickup, that was close to 19 pounds per collection. And then when you look at the cumulative, how much each household has contributed to the program so far, it's a total of 33.5 give or take pounds.
But this is based on less than a month?
Oh,
correct.
Yes.
Yep. So
Yeah,
very early.
We'll be back with more updates as we go. But the interesting part, though, about these early results is that they're really right in line with what we had anticipated in terms of both how many subscribed. I mean, of those we actively recruited, we have roughly 5% that signed up for it. That's what we expected with this type of pay your full way program where they can't reduce their garbage fees otherwise and so on. So, and then the pounds per household, I projected 14 pounds on it per household per week is basically what we would get. And so far, if you look at that 18.7 is of those who set out, but of all the households in the program, it's about 14 and a half pounds. So very early, and we'll have more data later.
And to summarize, overall, we've gotten really great feedback from the residents. I've included a variety of quotes on this slide, but I'd like to draw your attention to two. On the upper left, it says, "Please pass along my thank you to everyone involved. It is innovative things like this that make me proud to live in Milwaukee." And on the lower right, "I have 2 garbage carts, and now with the organics cart, I want to return one of my garbage carts. How can I arrange that?"
To learn more, visit MilwaukeeRecycles.com. Late this summer, the Sherman Park area grieved the tragic accidental death of 2-year-old Michael McCoy III. The toddler was climbing through a screenless first-floor window when the window sash crashed down on him, killing him. So in order to better protect young children, the Zoning, Neighborhoods, and Development Committee heard a proposal on December 6th that would mandate the installation of window screens in most rental units.
Well, maybe I'll take it a step back and talk about what the code currently requires.
Sure.
It says every window required for ventilation shall have a window screen, with an exception for windows above the 5th floor. So when I drafted Alderman Rainey's amendment, I also included the exception for windows above the 5th floor. And that exception goes back to 1987, and there's no explanation as to why it was included in the code. It was part of a big rewrite of the building code. They added the exception, and all we can hypothesize is that because it used to be called insect screens, that it was because, well, insects aren't going to fly into the window above the 5th floor or something like that. So the difference between the original and the proposed substitute is that the exception for windows above the 5th floor is taken out. So all openable windows would have to have window screens.
Okay.
And again, this is only rentals. It's not condominiums. Would not apply to condos in the modern or any windows on a high-rise that don't open.
Okay. Thank you. Questions by committee at this time?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Alderman Rainey?
And first, I'd like to thank Mr. Osterman for his assistance with this piece of legislation. You know, this is a result of a death of a toddler by the name of Michael McCoy III, who, as most children do, wander off and found himself attempting to climb out a window and got stuck in the window, and the window dropped on him and he suffocated to death. It was then I realized that the city of Milwaukee does not require screen windows within rental dwellings for openable windows. I just thought it was the least that we could do to make sure we have the safety measures, the precautions in place as a city for those who are renters, just to make sure that they have adequate living, just to make sure they can avoid, situations as this. And in regards to the 5th floor and up, I would think that the higher you go, the more safety you would like to have for, children and people living in rental dwellings. So we passed this amendment unanimously in committee last time. We brought it back because there was concerns from some council members. I'm requesting support of my colleagues this morning. I think this is a step in making sure that we have, that we're taking a look at safety for those who are renting in the city of Milwaukee. And I can tell you now, I intend on establishing a work group, a task force, to examine all the codes and all the ordinances right now to make sure that we have the simple necessities such as screen windows. I mean, who knows? Maybe we don't require doorknobs on doors in the city of Milwaukee. Who knows? But I think it's just good legislation. I request your support.
Thank you, Alderman. And other questions, comments by committee members? The one thing that I do wonder is, do we know whether the code delineates how this may impact high-rise apartments? We get, once upon a time, a number of the buildings here up until about like 6-7 years ago, we were getting a lot of condominiums. More recently, we've seen high-rise apartments like the Modern, as an example. You could find some apartments that have a fair amount of glass. Does this require screening for every single window in terms of every single pane, or?
No, only if it's an openable window.
Okay.
And
And if it-
many of those
So that an
panes of glass
openable
do
window
not-
isn't one that you just simply open by pushing it open and have it open air? It would need to be able to have a slide, a sash, or something along that line.
No, I think a crank out would also need
Okay.
a screen as well.
Very
yes.
good. Very good. Thank you for clarifying that. Other questions? Let the record reflect that Alderman Kovac joins the committee. Alderman Kovac.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I supported this last time, and I know the sponsor referred it back because of concerns specifically raised by Alderman Bauman, having a lot of the high-rise downtown buildings. Has he been directly involved, or anyone from the downtown apartment or the overall apartment association on that?
The Apartment Association, we did notice on this hearing.
Been noticed,
That's
okay.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah. We want to, as you know, they can be very interested in certain pieces of legislation, so we made sure that they were involved in this. Alderman Rainey, at this point, would move to amend the file to introduce proposed substitute A in lieu of the original. Hearing no objections to that, so ordered. Are there any interested parties in the room wishing to come forward and provide testimony on this particular matter before us? Anyone in the room? Okay. Hearing seeing none, then Alderman Rainey would move to recommend passage of the file as amended, and hearing no objections to that, so ordered.
The council adopted the measure on a unanimous vote. When people dial 911 in an emergency, it's expected that they'll get a prompt response. But staffing shortages have plagued the Milwaukee Telecommunications Center that handles the 911 calls, resulting in several high-profile cases in which departmental reviews determined the 911 response was inadequate. So at the urging of the council and the mayor, the Fire and Police Commission has redoubled its efforts to fill the staffing vacancies and increase staff retention. On December 1st, the Public Safety Committee heard an update on their efforts.
I know this has been an issue in front of this committee for a couple years, and I want to applaud Alderman Witkowski and his tenacity and going after this, rightfully so. This has been a concern certainly to a lot of our constituents. We hear on a regular basis calls to the 911 call center or the non-emergency number. They may be on hold and so on. We've gone through, just by way of background, the reality that we're approximately 30 positions short, or we were recently and for quite some time. So that's placed a burden on the call center.
From everything that I heard sitting on finance, it was that we should have this problem fairly well licked before the summer high call volume comes in. And I just want to make sure that we're still on schedule. It does involve 3 different agencies. I think an awful lot has been done, but it's been a 2-year effort. It's been a situation where, well, the complexity of different departments, not necessarily all moving in the same direction at the same time, keeps us moving slowly. We've had at least 25 vacancies 2 years in a row, and we held hearings. And last time I heard, we didn't have a list to choose from any longer. Purpose of this file today is to make sure that we're moving along on the hiring process, that people will be trained and ready to start by spring.
It has been my pleasure to work on trying to fill the vacancies for the dispatch office since I started in September 2015, made it a top priority. As you know, the positions were reclassified, the rate of pay was changed, the minimum qualifications were increased so that we would have more qualified candidates. A job analysis was done, and there was a recruitment this summer. From that recruitment, we went through a series of testing, and I can get into details about the testing if you'd like, but that's all done now. We have an eligible list. We are administering 3 additional tests in the next couple of weeks, so the list will be finalized at the Fire and Police Commission December 15 meeting. Right after that meeting, we have the meds and psychs scheduled. And so depending on backgrounds, which MPD has told me to do 100 backgrounds of this type, it'll take 4 weeks. Then there's also an appellate process to the FPC. But I think we should be able to hire for the vacancies mid to late January.
And how many vacancies do we currently have, and will all of them be filled by that time?
There are currently 31 vacancies. There were 33, but 2 persons just self-demoted.
We have 150 plus positions altogether, but currently there are over 30 of them are vacant. So that is a high percentage of vacancy, which is why we are having some difficulties with our response to the calls. That's one of the reasons why people get put on hold, is because we have 33 people short. We have been trying to cover those vacancies with overtime. However, you can only work so many hours of overtime to the point of where you're not as productive as you would be. We have really asked our people that are currently working in those positions to step up, and they have. But it's difficult to work it's difficult to work there and to take all the calls and to not have that break. You're taking twice as many calls because you only have half as many people as you need. So it's really important to us that we fill these positions.
As you correctly identified, June or the summer is when our call volume begins to slowly rise, and it peaks mid-July, and that starts to slowly fall off from there. Obviously, it follows the weather trends. So we want to be prepared to be postured to accept that higher call volume and to make up the deficit of our capacity that we've had thus far due to the attrition of our personnel. The timeline for training, it takes about 4 to 6 months to effectively train a new recruit, if you will, to perform these duties. At that time, they'll be trained to do telecommunications duties. They're hired to be Echo 2s, which means the ultimate plan for the division is that going forward, we are only going to hire Echo 2s, and that job classification title may change because, once again, we're going through a process of redoing that this year with DER. What that would mean is that would give us staffing flexibility to have every employee that we have either answer the phones, which would be telecommunications work, or dispatch squads, which would be the police dispatcher positions. Those used to be the old titles. Police telecommunicator, and then it was police dispatcher. They will be prepared to answer the phones. They will be prepared to do telecommunications duties by June if and when we make this date and receive those recruits in January, February at the latest.
We have some officers that are on disability, I would say physical disability, not so much from a psychological standpoint, but could we consider those officers that are not able, let's say, to run or whatever, but they clearly have the background, they've got the psychological, can they be trained? I mean, is that a pool that we can tap?
Well, sir, currently housed in the telecommunications division, which is the 911 center.
Yeah.
We have the DPR, which is the Differential Police Response Unit. As a result of the current staffing, what I've been doing is I've been training as many of those individuals to conduct TC duties. In addition to that, Chief Yerke's authorized me to reach out to the rest of the department, and I've trained 17 officers who are assigned to other work locations to offer them blocks of overtime. So like the chief mentioned, we do have to pay overtime to cover some of these gaps. But there's sometimes it's just humanly impossible for the Echoes to do that. And when we have those openings, we then open those blocks up for others to come in and fill those duties. So those are stopgaps that we've done. But what we found out of the 17 officers that we trained to do this, we had over 40 of them step forward to go through the training. Only 17 of them were able to complete this training. It's a very different skill set.
Currently, how many Echo staff do you have that are either bilingual, speak Spanish, or?
Yes, sir. We have About 3.
Okay.
And so that is a need, and I know I received some of the emails inquiring about this. How do we manage when we deal with non-English speakers who call 911 is we contract through AT&T for a language service line. And if I absolutely agree with you that it would be very advantageous if we had more bilingual telecommunicators or our police phone operators, because it is an expense that the division incurs to utilize this language line.
And so, was this, with the reclassification recruitment, was this something that we're very specific about when looking at filling the void then for multicultural competency and possibly lingual echo operators?
Well, we did do targeted recruitment, but we did not test for bilingual. What I would recommend we can do is survey the list. And then also, at some point in the future, near future, we could do a targeted bilingual recruitment.
Because I know police officers have a very small, minimal bump in their pay if they're using those skills, and wondering if that's something that can be done also here.
I have a question regarding the bilingual officers, okay, or telecommunicators for that matter. Do we give them a bump in their application process if they are bilingual at the Fire and Police Commission? In other words, if a veteran applies, he gets certain points. I think, and quite frankly, I brought it up in years past, I think the need for an increasing number of bilingual officers, I could see an advantage to giving them a few extra points if they're bilingual. That is a valuable asset, and one, quite frankly, that ties up squads all the time for Spanish translation or whatever. So.
No, we don't currently have preference points for bilingual, but what we can do is...
That was told to me 2 or 3 years ago, and I'm bringing it up again.
Okay.
So please write it down, put that on your, what do we have to do? Do we have to send a letter to the Fire and Police Commission to, what's the process?
Well, we have other techniques. We can do a selective certification. We can survey the list to determine who's bilingual, and do a selective certification and give them a preference to positions. We could do just a bilingual recruitment and have a separate list. So there are techniques.
One of the things that we're doing is we're going to be fundamentally transforming the division. I'm going to be the last uniformed commander of the division. I'm going to be replaced by a civilian manager. And so the goal was to create a track where someone could be hired as like an Echo 1, or will now be an Echo 2, and eventually hold my position. And that creates the incentive for longevity and the interest. And I think it will ultimately produce a better and more efficient division. We talked about these 10 auxiliary positions. One of our interests in doing that is that's going to allow us to implement this civilianization process. I think one of the things that we will see when, like right now, the first iteration of the change was the reclassification of the employees into the Echo 1 and the Echo 2 brackets. What's going to happen next in this next iteration is that Echo structure will slightly change, and then we are hoping to introduce an actual supervisory group of civilians.
The next report on the status of the 911 vacancies is expected early in 2017. And that's a look back at some of the important issues from the most recent Common Council cycle. For the City Channel and Council Rewind, I'm Dustin Weiss.